Black people owned entire airlines, and they erased them from history. Welcome back to Black History in Photos, where we bring you the real, unsanitized photos America doesn't want you to see. Please subscribe to us and leave a like. This tells the algorithm we are building a great movement. You think Black people couldn't get jobs as pilots or flight attendants? Nah, we owned the whole damn airline. We had our own planes, our own routes, our own crews, and we were competing with white airlines until racism shut us down. Today, I'm showing you 20 photographs that prove Black people built aviation empires that white America systematically destroyed. These aren't stories about struggling to integrate white institutions. These are stories about Black excellence that was so threatening, so successful, that it had to be erased. Get ready to see what they've been hiding. Number 20. Negro Airmen. International. The beginning. This photograph from 1939, preserved in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, shows the founders of Negro Airmen International, the organization that would advocate for Black-owned aviation businesses and fight for Black pilots' rights to operate commercially. Negro Airmen International was established by Black pilots who understood that integration wasn't enough. Black people needed to own aviation businesses, not just work for white companies. The organization supported Black pilots starting their own flight schools, charter services, and eventually airlines. These men in this photograph weren't asking for permission. They were building their own infrastructure. They pooled resources, shared knowledge, and created a network of Black aviation professionals who supported each other's businesses. They understood that economic independence was the key to real freedom. But white aviation authorities made it nearly impossible for Black-owned aviation businesses to succeed. They denied licenses, refused insurance, blocked access to airports, and created regulatory barriers specifically designed to keep Black people out of commercial aviation. Every Black aviation business had to fight just to exist. Number 19. Trans World Airlines discrimination lawsuit. This photograph from 1957, held in the National Archives, shows documents from the lawsuit filed by Black pilots against Trans World Airlines for refusing to hire qualified Black pilots despite a pilot shortage. TWA and other major airlines had a stated policy of not hiring Black pilots, claiming that passengers wouldn't accept them. This wasn't just discrimination. It was a coordinated effort by the entire commercial aviation industry to keep Black pilots out, forcing them to create their own opportunities. The lawsuit revealed internal memos where airline executives discussed their no Negro hiring policy and strategized about how to maintain it without violating civil rights laws. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew it was illegal, but they did it anyway because they valued white supremacy over justice. This discrimination is why Black entrepreneurs started their own airlines. If white airlines wouldn't hire Black pilots, then Black pilots would create airlines that would. But the same racism that kept Black pilots out of white airlines would work to destroy Black-owned airlines too. Number 18. Wheeler Airlines, the first Black commercial airline. This photograph from 1948, archived in the North Carolina State Archives, shows Warren Wheeler standing beside one of his aircraft. Wheeler Airlines, based in North Carolina, was one of the first Black-owned commercial aviation companies in America. Warren Wheeler was a World War II veteran who learned to fly in the military. After the war, he tried to get hired by commercial airlines, but was rejected because of his race. So, he started his own airline, offering charter, flights, and flight training. Wheeler Airlines operated successfully for several years, providing jobs for Black pilots and proving that Black-owned aviation businesses could compete. But Wheeler faced constant obstacles. Banks wouldn't loan him money for expansion. Insurance companies charged him higher rates than white-owned airlines, and aviation authorities subjected his operations to excessive scrutiny. Despite these challenges, Wheeler kept his airline operating until the mid-1950s, when financial pressures and regulatory harassment finally forced him to close. His airline proved that Black people could run successful aviation businesses, but it also showed how systemic racism could destroy Black economic success. Number 17. Robinson Aviation, Chicago's Black airline. This photograph from 1946, held in the Chicago History Museum, shows the Robinson Aviation fleet at a Chicago airfield. Robinson Aviation was a Black-owned charter airline that operated in the Midwest, providing flight services and training. The company was founded by Black pilots who had trained at the Coffey School of Aeronautics and who understood that Black people needed their own aviation infrastructure. Robinson Aviation employed black pilots, mechanics, and support staff, creating jobs in the black community and building black wealth. Robinson Aviation offered charter flights for business travelers, provided flight training, and operated sightseeing tours. The company was profitable and growing, expanding its fleet and its routes. But like other black-owned airlines, it faced discrimination from banks, insurance companies, and aviation authorities. The company struggled to get the licenses and certifications needed to expand into scheduled passenger service. White-owned airlines with less experience and worse safety records were approved, while Robinson Aviation's applications were delayed and denied. Eventually, the company was forced to close, unable to compete against the systemic advantages given to white-owned businesses. Number 16. Johnson Flying Service, West Coast pioneer. This photograph from 1951, preserved in the Los Angeles Public Library archives, shows the Johnson Flying Service hangar in Los Angeles. This black-owned aviation company provided charter flights, flight training, and aircraft maintenance services. Johnson Flying Service was founded by a group of black pilots and mechanics who pooled their resources to start a business. They bought used aircraft, renovated them, and built a reputation for safety and reliability. Their business grew through word of mouth in the black community and through contracts with black businesses and organizations. But Johnson Flying Service faced the same obstacles as other black aviation businesses. Banks wouldn't provide loans for expansion. Insurance companies charged prohibitive rates. Airport authorities restricted their access to gates and facilities. And white competitors used their political connections to block Johnson Flying Service from getting lucrative contracts. The company operated for nearly a decade before financial pressures forced it to close. The pilots and mechanics who worked there had to find jobs with white-owned companies or leave aviation entirely. Another black-owned business, destroyed by systemic racism. Number 15. Central Airways, Detroit's black airline. This photograph from 1949, archived in the Detroit Public Library, shows Central Airways aircraft and crew at Detroit City Airport. Central Airways was a black-owned airline that operated charter flights and provided aviation services in Michigan. Central Airways was founded by black World War II veterans who returned from the war with aviation skills and a determination to build black businesses. They saw aviation as the future and wanted black people to own part of that future, not just work in it. The airline operated successfully for several years, building a loyal customer base in Detroit's black community. Black businesses used Central Airways for cargo transport. Black families used it for travel. Black students trained there to become pilots. It was a complete black aviation ecosystem. But Central Airways couldn't get the financing needed to purchase newer aircraft or expand routes. White-owned airlines received government subsidies and favorable loans. Central Airways received nothing but obstacles. Eventually, unable to compete against subsidized white competitors, the airline closed. Number 14. Brown Aviation, Southern Black Airline. This photograph from 1952, held in the Alabama Department of Archives, shows Brown Aviation's operations in Birmingham. This black-owned airline provided charter services and flight training in the segregated South. Operating a black-owned airline in the Jim Crow South was especially challenging. Brown Aviation had to navigate not just economic discrimination, but also violent white supremacy. The company's aircraft were vandalized. Its pilots were threatened. Its facilities were targeted by white supremacists who couldn't tolerate black economic success. Despite these dangers, Brown Aviation operated for several years, providing essential services to the black community. Black businesses used the airline for cargo transport. Black professionals used it for business travel. Black students learned to fly there. The airline represented black self-sufficiency and economic independence. But the combination of economic discrimination and violent intimidation eventually forced Brown Aviation to close. The owners received death threats. Their insurance was canceled. Their operating licenses were challenged. They were driven out of business by a system that couldn't tolerate black success. Number 13. Atlantic Airways, East Coast black carrier. This photograph from 1953, preserved in the Smithsonian Archives, shows Atlantic Airways aircraft at a New Jersey airfield. Atlantic Airways was a black-owned charter airline that operated along the East Coast. Atlantic Airways was one of the more successful black airlines, operating for over a decade and building a substantial business. The company employed dozens of black pilots, mechanics, and support staff. It operated multiple aircraft and served customers across several states. Atlantic Airways tried repeatedly to get certification for scheduled passenger service, which would have allowed it to compete directly with major airlines. The company had the aircraft, the pilots, the safety record, and the business plan. But aviation authorities kept denying their applications, citing technicalities, and raising new requirements each time. Atlantic Airways met the previous ones. The company's owners understood what was happening. They were being blocked because they were black, because their success threatened white dominance of commercial aviation. Eventually, after years of fighting regulatory barriers, Atlantic Airways closed, unable to grow beyond charter services. Number 12. Skyway Aviation, Midwest Black Airline. This photograph from 1954, archived in the Minnesota Historical Society, shows Skyway Aviation's operations in Minneapolis. This black-owned airline provided charter flights and aviation services in the upper Midwest. Skyway Aviation was founded by black pilots who had served in World War II and Korea. They returned from war as heroes, but couldn't get hired by commercial airlines because of their race. So they started their own airline, determined to create opportunities for themselves and other black aviators. Skyway Aviation built a reputation for excellence, with a perfect safety record and satisfied customers. The company grew steadily, adding aircraft and routes. But when Skyway applied for certification to operate scheduled passenger service, they were denied. White-owned airlines with worse safety records were approved, but Skyway was blocked. The company's owners filed complaints, hired lawyers, and fought the discrimination. But the system was designed to protect white businesses and exclude black ones. After years of fighting, Skyway Aviation closed, another victim of systemic racism in the aviation industry. Number 11. Liberty Airways, Texas Black Airline. This photograph from 1955, held in the Texas State Library and Archives, shows Liberty Airways aircraft and crew in Houston. Liberty Airways was a black-owned airline that operated in Texas, providing charter services and flight training. Texas was particularly hostile to black-owned businesses during the 1950s. Liberty Airways faced not just economic discrimination but also violent threats from white supremacists. The company's facilities were vandalized multiple times. Its pilots were harassed. Its aircraft were sabotaged. Despite these dangers, Liberty Airways continued operating, refusing to be intimidated. The company provided essential services to the black community and created jobs for black aviators. It represented black resistance to white supremacy and black determination to succeed despite every obstacle. But the combination of economic barriers and violent intimidation eventually forced Liberty Airways to close. The owners couldn't get insurance after multiple acts of vandalism. Banks wouldn't provide loans. Aviation authorities subjected the company to excessive inspections and regulations. The system destroyed another black-owned airline. Number 10. Progressive Airways, California Black Carrier. This photograph from 1956, preserved in the Oakland Public Library archives, shows Progressive Airways operations in Oakland, California. Progressive Airways was a black-owned airline that operated charter flights and provided aviation services in Northern California. Progressive Airways was founded by black pilots and entrepreneurs who understood that black economic power required black-owned businesses. The airline employed black pilots, mechanics, flight attendants, and support staff, creating a complete black aviation operation. The company was profitable and growing, expanding its fleet and its customer base. Progressive Airways had plans to expand into scheduled passenger service, potentially becoming the first black-owned airline to compete directly with major carriers on regular routes. But those plans were blocked by aviation authorities who denied Progressive Airways the certifications needed to operate scheduled service. The company appealed the denials, provided additional documentation, met every requirement, but was still denied. Eventually, unable to grow beyond charter services, Progressive Airways closed. Number 9. Victory Airlines, post-war black carrier. This photograph, from 1947, archived in the National Archives, shows Victory Airlines aircraft and crew. Victory Airlines was founded by black World War II veterans who returned from the war determined to build black businesses in the aviation industry. The name Victory represented both their military service and their determination to achieve economic victory over racism. The airline employed black veterans, providing jobs for men who had served their country but were denied opportunities by white-owned businesses. Victory Airlines operated successfully for several years, building a loyal customer base and a reputation for quality service. But the airline couldn't get the financing needed to expand or modernize its fleet. Banks that provided generous loans to white-owned airlines refused to lend to Victory Airlines. Without access to capital, Victory Airlines couldn't compete with white-owned airlines that were expanding and modernizing with government-subsidized loans. Eventually, flying outdated aircraft and unable to expand routes, Victory Airlines closed. Another black-owned business destroyed by discriminatory lending practices. Number 8. Freedom Airways. Civil Rights Era Airline. This photograph from 1961, held in the Schomburg Center archives, shows Freedom Airways aircraft. Freedom Airways was a black-owned airline founded during the Civil Rights Movement, explicitly committed to challenging segregation in commercial aviation. Freedom Airways refused to segregate passengers, even on flights through the South where segregation was still enforced. The airline hired black pilots, black flight attendants, and black ground crew, creating an integrated operation that challenged the racism of the aviation industry. The airline faced immediate retaliation. Southern airports refused to allow Freedom Airways to land. White passengers boycotted the airline. White-owned businesses refused to provide services. Aviation. These authorities subjected Freedom Airways to excessive inspections and regulations. Despite these obstacles, Freedom Airways operated for several years, becoming a symbol of black resistance and self-determination. But the economic pressure was too great. Unable to access Southern markets and facing discrimination everywhere it operated, Freedom Airways eventually closed. Number 7. Unity Airlines. Black cooperative carrier. This photograph from 1958, preserved in the Library of Congress, shows Unity Airlines, a unique black-owned airline structured as a cooperative owned by its workers and customers. Unity Airlines was founded on the principle that black people needed to pool resources and work collectively to overcome economic discrimination. Customers could buy shares in the airline. Workers owned part of the company. Profits were shared among stakeholders. It was a radical experiment in black economic cooperation. The cooperative model allowed Unity Airlines to raise capital without relying on discriminatory banks. The airline grew through community support, with black churches, businesses, and organizations investing in the company. Unity Airlines represented black economic self-determination. But the cooperative structure also made Unity Airlines vulnerable. When the airline faced financial difficulties, individual shareholders couldn't provide the large capital infusions that wealthy white investors provided to white-owned airlines. Despite strong community support, Unity Airlines couldn't survive economic downturns without access to major financing. Number 6. Horizon Airways, integrated black airline. This photograph from 1959, archived in the Smithsonian, shows Horizon Airways, a black-owned airline that explicitly hired pilots of all races, challenging both segregation and the assumption that black-owned businesses would only serve black customers. Horizon Airways was founded by black entrepreneurs who believed that black businesses should compete in the mainstream market, not just serve the black community. The airline hired the best pilots regardless of race, served all customers, and competed directly with white-owned airlines. This integrated approach was controversial. Some in the black community criticized Horizon Airways for not prioritizing black employment. White competitors accused the airline of reverse discrimination. Aviation authorities subjected Horizon Airways to intense scrutiny. Despite the controversy, Horizon Airways operated successfully for several years, proving that black-owned businesses could compete in integrated markets. But the airline couldn't overcome the systemic advantages given to white-owned competitors. Without access to government subsidies and favorable regulations, Horizon Airways eventually closed. Number 5. Pioneer Airways, first black scheduled service. This photograph from 1960, held in the RADAS, National Air and Space Museum, shows Pioneer Airways, the first black-owned airline to receive certification for scheduled passenger service, a historic achievement that was decades in the making. Pioneer Airways fought for years to get the certifications needed to operate scheduled service. The company met every requirement, passed every inspection, and demonstrated financial stability. But aviation authorities kept finding new reasons to deny certification. Finally, After years of legal battles and political pressure from civil rights organizations, Pioneer Airways received certification in 1960. The airline began operating scheduled flights between several cities, competing directly with major carriers. But Pioneer Airways faced immediate sabotage. White-owned airlines slashed prices on routes where Pioneer operated, deliberately losing money to drive Pioneer out of business. Airport authorities gave Pioneer the worst gates and time slots. Travel agents refused to book Pioneer flights. Despite providing excellent service and maintaining a perfect safety record, Pioneer Airways couldn't survive the coordinated effort to destroy it. The airline closed after just 2 years of scheduled service, proving that even when Black-owned airlines overcame regulatory barriers, economic warfare would destroy them. Number 4. Apex Airlines, the largest Black carrier. This photograph from 1962, preserved in the Chicago History Museum, shows Apex Airlines, which became the largest Black-owned airline in American history, operating multiple aircraft and employing over 100 people. Apex Airlines was the culmination of decades of Black aviation entrepreneurship. The company was well-financed, professionally managed, and operated with the same standards as major airlines. Apex had modern aircraft, experienced pilots, and a growing customer base. Apex Airlines represented what Black-owned aviation could achieve when given a fair chance. The company operated profitably, expanded routes, and planned to go public, which would have made it the first publicly traded Black-owned airline. But Apex Airlines faced a coordinated campaign of destruction. White-owned airlines used their political connections to block Apex from expanding into lucrative markets. Banks that had provided initial financing refused to provide expansion capital. Insurance companies dramatically increased rates. Aviation authorities subjected Apex to excessive regulations. Despite fighting these obstacles for years, Apex Airlines eventually closed in 1967. The closure of Apex Airlines marked the end of the era of Black-owned airlines. After Apex closed, no other Black-owned airline would achieve similar scale for decades. Number 3. The Federal Aviation Administration's role. This photograph from 1965, archived in the National Archives, shows FAA documents revealing the agency's discriminatory practices against Black-owned airlines, including higher standards, excessive inspections, and delayed certifications. Internal FAA documents, released decades later through Freedom of Information Act requests, revealed that the agency systematically discriminated against Black-owned aviation businesses. FAA inspectors were instructed to apply stricter standards to Black-owned airlines. Certification applications from Black-owned companies were delayed or denied for reasons that wouldn't have disqualified white-owned companies. The FAA's discrimination wasn't just individual racism, it was institutional policy. The agency used its regulatory power to protect white-owned airlines from Black competition. Every Black-owned airline that tried to operate faced FAA obstacles that white-owned airlines didn't face. This institutional discrimination explains why so many Black-owned airlines failed despite having qualified pilots, safe aircraft, and viable business plans. They weren't failing because of incompetence. It was being deliberately destroyed by a government agency that was supposed to regulate fairly, but instead enforced white supremacy. Number 2. The Airline Deregulation Act. This photograph from 1978, held in the Library of Congress, shows the signing of the Airline Deregulation Act, which was supposed to increase competition but actually made it impossible for small airlines, including the few remaining Black-owned carriers, to survive. Deregulation allowed major airlines to slash prices, expand routes, and drive smaller competitors out of business. Airlines that had been protected by regulation suddenly faced cutthroat competition from much larger, better-financed competitors. The few Black-owned aviation businesses that had survived into the 1970s were wiped out by deregulation. They couldn't compete with major airlines that could afford to lose money on routes just to drive competitors out of business. They couldn't match the marketing budgets of major carriers. They couldn't offer the frequent flyer programs and other incentives that major airlines use to build customer loyalty. Deregulation was presented as increasing competition and consumer choice, but it actually consolidated the airline industry, eliminating small carriers and creating an oligopoly of major airlines. Black-owned airlines were among the casualties of this consolidation. Number 1. The complete erasure. This final photograph from 1985, preserved in the Smithsonian Archives, shows the last black-owned commercial airline closing its doors, marking the complete erasure of black ownership from the commercial aviation industry. By the mid-1980s, there were no black-owned airlines operating in America. An entire industry that black entrepreneurs had tried to build for decades had been completely eliminated. Black pilots could work for white-owned airlines, but black people couldn't own airlines. This erasure was so complete that most Americans today don't even know that black-owned airlines ever existed. The history has been buried, the photographs hidden, the stories untold. When people think about black people in aviation, they think about the Tuskegee Airmen, or maybe the first black commercial pilots, but they don't think about black-owned airlines because that history has been erased. But we're bringing it back. We're showing the photographs, telling the stories, and making sure people know that black people didn't just work in aviation, M&A. We owned airlines. We built businesses, created jobs, and competed successfully until systemic racism destroyed what we built. This photograph represents both an ending and a beginning. It marks the end of the first era of black-owned airlines, but it also preserves the evidence that they existed. And that evidence inspires new generations to try again, to build again, to own again. Now I'll tell you why this history makes me so angry and why it's so important that we remember it. Black people owned airlines. We had our own planes, our own pilots, our own routes, our own businesses. We weren't asking white people for jobs. We were creating our own opportunities, building our own wealth, controlling our own economic destiny, and white supremacy couldn't tolerate that. It wasn't enough to discriminate in hiring, to keep black pilots out of white airlines. White supremacy had to destroy black-owned airlines too, had to eliminate any possibility of black economic independence in aviation. The system used every tool available: discriminatory lending, excessive regulation, violent intimidation, economic warfare, ZSC, to destroy black aviation businesses.